New Year's Eve of 2020. A year everyone wanted to leave behind. My friend Logan was hosting a house party, and I'd arrived early to help him set up. His parents were out for the night, so the house was ours until morning. I'd even claimed a spot to sleep in their room, ensuring I could drink without worrying about driving home. The party started strong. By midnight, the house was alive with energy as everyone cheered, "Happy New Year!" Drinks clinked, laughter echoed, and for a moment, the weight of the year seemed to lift. But as the night wore on, people started trickling out, to other parties, bars, or their homes. By around 3 a.m., only the closest of friends remained. It had dwindled into a quiet drinking session in the living room, a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. It was just Logan, Cody, and me now. Cody was already dozing off on the couch while Logan and I nursed the last of our drinks. That's when we heard it for the first time, a faint creaking sound. At first, we didn't pay much attention. "Probably the fridge," Logan said. It was a flimsy explanation, but it was late, and neither of us wanted to investigate. But as the minutes passed, the sound repeated. It was distinct, like wood slowly groaning under pressure. Logan and I exchanged uneasy glances. "What is that?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "I don't know," he muttered, standing up. We followed the sound into the kitchen, but it wasn't coming from there. As we moved closer to the basement door, the noise grew louder. We stopped, staring at the closed door. "It's coming from down there," I said. Logan hesitated before opening the door. The creaking was clearer now, drifting up from the darkness below. "Yo, who's down there?" Logan called, his voice steady despite the tension hanging in the air. The sound stopped. Silence enveloped the house, the kind that makes your heart pound louder in your ears. After a minute of standing frozen at the top of the stairs, Logan and I exchanged a look. "We should check," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought. "No way," Logan whispered, but we both knew we wouldn't be able to sleep until we did. Grabbing knives from the kitchen, more for courage than practicality, we started down the stairs. The basement was dim and cluttered. An old couch, a TV, a bar, and piles of junk filled the space. It wasn't large, but it was enough to make us feel exposed. We searched every corner, pulling aside boxes and checking behind furniture. Nothing. No one. Then, in the corner of the room, I saw it, an old rocking chair. Its wooden frame gleamed faintly in the low light. I approached it slowly, my breath catching as I nudged it with my foot. The chair rocked forward, emitting that same unmistakable creak. "It's the chair," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Logan and I locked eyes, the realization sinking in. I sat in the chair, rocking it back and forth. The creaking was identical to the sound we'd been hearing. Every hair on my body stood on end. "That chair belonged to my grandma," Logan said suddenly, his voice shaking. "She passed away years ago. My mom keeps it for sentimental reasons." I shot out of the chair, and without a word, we bolted up the stairs, slamming the door behind us. Back in the living room, we tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe the rocking chair had been unbalanced. Maybe a draft had set it in motion. But deep down, neither of us believed that. There was no draft, no logical explanation. Something had moved that chair. Logan locked the basement door that night and didn't open it until his parents returned days later. We never spoke about it again. But I still think about that night whenever I hear a creaking sound in the dead of night. I've never believed in the paranormal, never experienced anything like it before or since. But something happened in that basement. The clock had barely struck 2 a.m. when my husband and I finally returned to our apartment after a night of welcoming the new year. The streets were quiet, the kind of eerie silence that amplifies every sound around you. Though we had a few drinks earlier in the evening, neither of us was drunk, just tired, eager to retreat to the warmth of our home. We lived in the penthouse suite of our complex, a corner unit tucked away at the very end of the top floor. The building was upscale, with high rents and limited access to our floor, lending an air of exclusivity. But that night, the emptiness of the foyer felt unsettling. The doorman was absent, and the flicker of a single bulb cast jagged shadows along the marble walls. As the elevator ascended smoothly, I leaned back, already imagining the bliss of kicking off my heels and sinking into bed. The bell chimed, signaling our arrival. The doors slid open, and we turned the corner toward our suite, only to stop dead in our tracks. At the far end of the hallway, a woman was moving unsteadily, her figure illuminated by the dim, flickering light. Her long, dark hair hung in tangled clumps, obscuring her face. She wore a black lace dress, torn and frayed, clinging to her as though it had weathered some violent storm. Her bare feet padded softly against the floor. My husband and I exchanged uneasy glances. We knew everyone on our floor, and this woman wasn't one of them. "Should we ask if she needs help?" I whispered. "Wait," he replied, his voice low. "She might just be lost. Or drunk." The woman shuffled along the wall, her movements jerky, almost unnatural. She stopped at each door, leaning close to peer into the peepholes. A low, guttural sound, somewhere between a hum and a growl, escaped her lips as she moved. My skin prickled with unease. When she stopped at the door of an elderly neighbor Tilly, I couldn't stay silent. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice trembling despite my attempt at composure. "Are you all right?" At the sound of my voice, the woman froze. Her hunched frame seemed to tremble before she slowly crouched to the floor. For a moment, I thought she was about to collapse or vomit. But then, a soft, sinister laugh broke the silence. It grew louder, building into a warped cackle that echoed through the hallway. "What the hell?" my husband muttered, stepping protectively in front of me. The woman straightened abruptly, her head tilting in a way that made my stomach twist. Her laughter morphed into an inhuman growl as she stumbled forward. She moved past Tilly's door, heading straight for ours. Before we could react, she stopped and began pounding on our door, shrieking like something feral. Her screams pierced the quiet, raw and guttural, making my heart race. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. "Hey!" my husband shouted, stepping forward. "Stop that!" The woman stopped mid-scream and dropped to the floor, crawling toward us with horrifying speed. As she approached, her face tilted upward, revealing pitch-black eyes and a mouth smeared with something dark. She hissed, a guttural, animalistic sound that sent a chill down my spine. Panic took over. Kicking off my heels, I grabbed my husband's arm, and we bolted toward the opposite staircase. We didn't dare risk waiting for the elevator, fearing she'd catch up before it arrived. We descended 2 flights before stopping to catch our breath, ears straining for any sound of pursuit. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the pounding of our hearts. After what felt like an eternity, we mustered the courage to return to our floor. The hallway was empty. The woman was gone. We rushed into our suite, locking the door behind us. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. The memory of her face, her twisted laugh, lingered like a stain in my mind. My husband texted the landlord, who promised to check the security cameras. The next morning, we learned there was no footage. The cameras had malfunctioned due to the cold. To this day, I don't know who or what that woman was. Every New Year's Eve, I'm haunted by the memory of her laughter and the dark emptiness of her eyes. It was a night I'll never forget, a chilling reminder that some encounters defy explanation. It was December 31st, New Year's Eve. My friend Alex had asked me to watch his dog, Bailey, for the weekend while he was out of town celebrating. At 35 years old, I didn't feel the same urge to party that Alex, who's 27, clearly did. Instead, I figured I'd make some extra cash and have a quiet night. Alex left early that Saturday morning, planning to return Sunday night. Bailey, a small, husky mix, was easy to care for. Alex left simple instructions: feed her, walk her twice a day, and keep her off the furniture. I packed a small bag with my laptop, toiletries, and a change of clothes for Sunday, settling into his spare room for the night. Alex and I weren't lifelong friends. We'd met through mutual acquaintances and hung out occasionally on weekends. Still, I didn't mind helping him out. After spending most of the day playing video games and watching movies, I decided to invite my girlfriend Trisha over with Alex's permission. He jokingly warned, "Just stay out of my bed," but he didn't mind her coming over. Trisha worked late and wouldn't arrive until after midnight, so I killed time alone with Bailey, who lay quietly by my feet. Around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a woman around 30 stood there wearing a hoodie and holding a jacket. She introduced herself as Alex's girlfriend and explained she'd left something in his room. "I can grab it for you if you want," I offered. She declined, saying she knew exactly where it was. I hesitated, but eventually let her in. She went upstairs to Alex's room, leaving the door slightly ajar. Feeling uneasy, I texted Alex, "I didn't know you had a girlfriend." She was upstairs for several minutes before returning with her jacket. On her way out, I asked casually, "How long have you two been dating?" "Too long," she replied with a smirk before heading out the door. Her response left me unsettled, and when Alex finally answered my call, I told him about the encounter. His confusion was immediate. "What are you talking about? I don't have a girlfriend," he said. My stomach sank. I described the woman, but Alex insisted he didn't know her. Realizing I may have just let a stranger into his house, Alex began to panic. He asked me to check his room for anything missing. Since I didn't know what was originally there, he listed specific items for me to verify. Everything seemed intact. After an hour of back-and-forth texts, Alex messaged me, "I think I know who it was. Just make sure she doesn't come back." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. Later that night, Trisha arrived. I told her what had happened, and she was just as shocked as I was. We stayed in the living room, talking, until Bailey suddenly lifted her head and stared at the front door. Moments later, there was a knock. This time, no doorbell. I froze. There was no way I was opening that door. I called Alex repeatedly, but he didn't pick up. Trisha and I stayed quiet until whoever it was eventually left. We retreated to the spare room with Bailey, locking the door behind us. We put on a movie to calm our nerves, but less than an hour after falling asleep, I woke to Bailey howling. She was at the door, her tail wagging, but her growls quickly replaced the howls. Then we heard it. Soft footsteps on the hardwood floor outside the door. The doorknob twisted. Thankfully, it was locked. A familiar female voice called out, "Alex?" I motioned for Trisha to stay quiet. The voice spoke again. "Who's in there?" "This is Alex's house." Summoning my courage, I shouted, "The cops have already been called. They'll be here any minute." There was silence, followed by faint whispers and the sound of multiple footsteps retreating. We stayed locked in the room until the police arrived. The front door had been left open, but the house was empty. I recounted the night's events to the officers, who eventually spoke with Alex over the phone. The working theory was that the woman had taken a key from Alex's room earlier and returned with accomplices. Alex begged me to stay the rest of the night, and though I sent Trisha home for her safety, I stayed with Bailey, barricading the front door with a chair. By morning, Alex had returned. He changed his locks immediately and later confided in me about the identity of the woman and her troubling past. While I won't share his private details, it became clear that men need to be just as cautious as anyone else when it comes to relationships. A year later, Alex hasn't reported any further incidents. But that night has stuck with me, a chilling reminder of how quickly a simple favor can spiral into something far more sinister.